Welcome, welcome, welcome. You are witnessing, you are watching, you are listening to Humanity in the Headlines. I am your host, Atiba Buchanan. I'm joined and flanked by my main man for the last time in 2018. My
Man,
brother, my pal, my friend, my confidant, Mr. David Seaton. How are you, sir?
it just hit me, man. This is the last show of 2018.
That's it.
It's about to be
The
2019.
next we meet, it will be a new year.
Man,
Yeah. So, off top, I just want to thank everyone that's on Facebook Live that's with us today. Definitely want to thank Mr. Earl Winfrey. Definitely want to thank Mr. Breon Jones for sticking with us yet another year in season 3 of Humanity in the Headlines. And we are just grateful to be here. I definitely want to thank my co-host, my brother, my friend, Mr. David Seaton, who week in and week out just performs and bringing excellent information, perspective, depth, and knowledge to the things that we look to talk about. And we just want to keep it going in 2019, taking it to new levels.
it's going to be a good year.
I agree. It's going to be a good day today. So let's focus on today. We've got a lot to talk about. We are going to get into, for those of you who are listening on Facebook Live, on IntellectualRadio.com, on YouTube, on iHeartRadio. First of all, we thank you for your participation. So if you are listening today, understand we got a couple things going on. We're going to talk about the shooting of the deputy sheriff in California by the undocumented person. And we're going to talk a little bit about just the whole premise of sanctuary cities and whether or not that played a role in that officer's death. We certainly have condolences for that officer, his unit, and his family. And later in the show, we're going to be joined by Mr. Michael Harriot, a contributor he's been writing for The Root for some time now. And he's going to be our guest as we kind of count down some of the top stories of 2018. You do not want to miss that. We'll definitely be talking about some of our rising Democratic stars and Stacey Abrams and Andrew Gillum. We're going to talk about the Me Too movement, the sentencing of Bill Cosby, and a whole lot more in that segment.
Real quick, we did a story last week on the wrestler that the referee made him cut his dreads. If you didn't get a chance to see that story last week, go check it out. That was a hot topic.
Absolutely. I'll post it again today on my Facebook wall.
Exactly. But the story came out in the last 24 to 48 hours that referee got fired.
Yeah. The story kind of evolved from him being suspended from, refereeing for that school to being generally suspended to being fired.
Right. Because a couple of schools actually came out and said if that particular ref was reffing, they weren't going to compete.
Right.
So there was kind of a groundswell that came up that got him fired. So, good. I guess, good for him. That was the right decision to make. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, people should be able to be allowed to be themselves no matter what they are. Unless it has something to do with cleanliness or safety or anything of that nature. But if it's just an aesthetic issue, just because you're not accustomed to seeing a certain look, you have to get over yourself.
So anybody out there who wants to comment on that, if you agree that ref should have been fired,
by all means,
and let us know what you think. Go ahead and give us a call. Post, make a post.
Yeah, absolutely. We love to read comments live on the show. You're welcome to call us today at 708-223-8953. Again, 708-223-8953. You're welcome to come on live today with us. We'd love to have your calls. So we're going to take a quick break to gather ourselves. When we come back, we discuss the shooting in California of Officer Ranil Singh on on Humanity in the Headlines on IntellectualRadio.com. We'll be right back. We are back on Humanity in the Headlines. quick break today. We are up against it as we got started a little bit late. That's my fault. My apologies. So we really got time against us. We're gonna hop right into it. So I'm reading. I'm going to read from a piece here, Dave. Um, this is from the San Francisco Chronicle. It came out today. The shooting was apparently in Stanislaus, California. The Stanislaus sheriff claims California sanctuary policies after arrest and officer slaying. He slams the California sanctuary policies. They were able to apprehend the guy, I guess, that shot the sheriff, and 8 people have been arrested in conjunction with this. So that's good news. That hopefully this officer and his family can be extracted some semblance of justice. Very unfortunate what happened, but just to catch everyone up who wasn't aware, a day laborer with gang affiliations and past arrest for drunken driving, who was in the country illegally, was captured outside Bakersfield in the high-profile killing of a Stanislaus County police officer, officials announced Friday. But while the arrest of Gustavo Perez Orrigia, 32, ended in a statewide manhunt in Wednesday's killing of Newman Police Corporal, I didn't know he was a Corporal Ronald Singh, revelations about the suspect's immigration status and criminal history reignited criticism of California's sanctuary state policy. At a news conference Friday, Stanislaus County Sheriff Adam Christensen echoed President Trump's calls for stricter border security as he railed against the state's sanctuary law. The policy, pushed by Democrats and signed in 2017 as SB 54, prohibits law enforcement from notifying or sharing detained immigrants' information with federal immigration agents when they are not accused of serious criminal charges. Christensen, again, the county sheriff, is a Republican, has been a vocal critic of the policy and met with President Trump at the White House in May to speak about the bill. The sheriff appears in a YouTube video posted by the White House, seated beside Trump during the meeting. On Friday, the sheriff said, quote, "The last thing in the world I want to do is politicize the death of Officer Singh," end quote. He then used the case to criticize California's law and suggested it led to the deadly encounter. With all of that back information, and hopefully that catches everyone up to what happened, with all that back information, Dave, I thought it was at least a fair question to ask. I don't fully understand the whole sanctuary city laws or the whole premise behind it. Generally speaking, as I understand it, what they're trying to do is acknowledge that there are undocumented people here, but if they are not breaking laws, if they are working, then what they're trying to do is keep them in a place where if they see a crime being committed, if there's something that needs to bring these people to the attention of law enforcement locally, that it does not turn into an immediate federal deportation. Does that sound about right?
That's correct. And here's the kind of ideological place where I separate myself from Republicans, because Republicans, for the most part, are big 10th Amendment supporters. The 10th Amendment being states' rights. Whenever it comes to abortion, whenever it comes to guns, whenever it comes to a topic that Republicans are really, that they really are passionate about, the first thing that comes out of their mouth is the 10th Amendment and states' rights.
To your point, and I'll let you get right back to it, we have many of the Civil War monuments up to this day as they cite states' rights. Right?
Exactly.
Go
exactly.
ahead.
So from that perspective, and the Republicans have tried to, specifically with California, they've tried to make an example of them by saying, hey, you need to cooperate with the federal government about immigration. We got, these examples of people being killed or people committing crimes, blah, blah, blah. So from that perspective, there's hypocrisy on the right, trying to use the 10th and trying to use that states' rights. Again, if it's a topic that they're passionate about, they want the sovereignty of the state to be respected. If it's a subject like immigration, then all of a sudden they want the supremacy clause to come into effect, and the federal government, their authority is sacrosanct. So there's some hypocrisy, from the right as far as them attacking California and their sanctuary city laws generally. But to your first point, yes, these laws are in place because, and that's the big thing that we have to remember when we're having this conversation, is that these people are coming across the border to work. They're coming across the border because there's some opportunity available to them here that's not available to them in their native country. So we can't attack these individuals without attacking the thing that's attracting them here in the first place. If you want to get rid of or if you want to get your arms around illegal immigration, there's some very easy ways to do it. Uh, but again, trying to paint with a broad brush an entire underclass of people for the actions of individuals, that's intellectually dishonest. That particular issue aside, to kind of take this into a larger conversation, again, the first thing that leaps out to me, or that leapt out to me when I read this story, was, wow, someone killed a police officer and they took them into custody.
You're right.
They didn't murder him. They took him into custody so he could face. So again, that takes us to a larger conversation about police misconduct, but that the fact that they were able to take this gentleman into custody, they didn't kill him, so forth and so on. As far as the police officer getting killed, I'm indifferent to that. Just because of the police conduct generally in the United States against people of color. But again, to your larger point about the sanctuary city issue, I can't take any criticism of the state of California and how they handle their immigration situation seriously, coming from the right, because it's so rife with hypocrisy.
Well said, my friend. And so I agree with probably 99% of everything that you just said. I do take not even exception. I will just say that I couldn't help but, to me, it just sounded hypocritical when you said, when you criticize them for wanting to admonish a group of people for the actions of a few, and then say, I'm indifferent about a cop being killed because of police behavior generally.
Well, again, in the case, if I would probably be more inclined to side with individuals who are beholden to our institutions of police when something happens to a police officer, if police officers as a group would admonish themselves, the individuals within their group, when they err.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
You and I are in complete agreement on that. That's,
right.
we are
Again,
lockstep in that.
that's the hypocrisy, is that when an individual in our society commits a crime, police want to paint with a broad brush. If it's undocumented, if it's an undocumented immigrant who commits a crime, well, all undocumented
They're
immigrants
rapists
committed,
and
they're
murderers.
rapists and murderers and blah blah blah, and they're just coming here to suck up the social services,
And don't forget, many of them have calves the size of cantaloupes.
because they're all drug mules.
Right.
Right. If a person of color gets into an altercation with a police officer, then police officers respond, generally speaking, they respond a certain way because they paint people of color with a broad brush. Well, all people of color behave like this, so we have to respond like this in every situation. So if police officers are going to behave like this, but then when a police officer messes up, then they want to say, well, hey, one bad apple doesn't spoil the bunch. They want to be viewed as individuals, when that's not the way that they police this citizenry, and we're the ones that are subjected to the whims of individuals who would go out and who would murder someone, or would take justice into their own hands. So again, I think it's fair to say that police officers do not have a do not have an objective mechanism of accountability for their own.
And they have a greater responsibility to do it.
They have the greater responsibility because they have the greatest privilege.
Right. They have the gun.
They have the gun
and the right to use it.
They have the gun. They have the right to use it. They have the right to individually determine the threat level and make decisions about life and death. And then they have the apparatus of the state behind them, when they do go out and they commit these acts. So because they have so much privilege, we should be giving them a larger slice of the responsibility. But that's not at all how it is in reality.
Well said. And I just wanted to kind of go over that, that finer point. So because, people hear what they want to hear and understand what they want to understand. So I just kind of wanted to go over that because, I could see people trying to make that point to us later. So again, well said, well explained. So, with that said, Dave, how does Trump's border wall affect this? Will it help?
Well, all I'll say is, and Earl,
considering that we're shut down over it right now.
Well, Earl and I were talking about this right before the show, and he brought up a good point. And he said, hey, Trump said, until the Congress gives him his $5 billion, the border is shut down. And when he's saying the border is shut down, he's including commercial traffic that goes across the border every day. There are billions of dollars in transactions that go across the border every day, whether it's produce, whether it's people, whether it's whatever. So Trump has said, hey, Democrats are obstructionists. Nancy Pelosi and her whole cabal in the House, until they give me my $5 billion, the border is shut down. Nothing's getting across the border. Nothing and no one. So why do we need the wall? If he can arbitrarily shut the border down at a cost of $1 billion a day, by the way.
At least. I mean, here's the deal. We talk about these Trump supporters and these deplorables and the things that will make them upset. I want to see what's going to happen when avocados can't get through.
Well, Trump supporters don't eat vegetables.
I ain't talking about them. That's my point. I'm
sorry. That was. I took it too far. That was funny.
I'm talking about all. I'm talking about all the liberals. The exact opposite of the Trump supporters. You think they're like quiet and meek and mild? Let them avocados not get through here for a week.
Well, again, to your larger point, Trump is so, again, he's so petulant that in order to, I wonder how long it's going to take for his supporters to say, hey, dude, we understand you want this wall and we understand you want this $5 billion, but in so doing, you have put something in place that's costing orders of magnitude more than that $5 billion. I don't have the number in front of me, but I dare say that the avocado revenue is more than $5 billion annually.
Absolutely.
It's got to be.
We get some of the best produce that we have in this country from Mexico.
So again, it's like, we had that conversation, a long time ago about, that biblical story about, the two women go to Solomon, and Solomon, he can't figure out who's the mother of the baby. So he cut the baby in half, and the woman who already lost her baby said, yeah, sure, go ahead, cut him in half. And that's what we're dealing with with the Trump supporters. I want to make a distinction between Republicans and Trump supporters, because Trump supporters, they are willing be willing to take on the ill effects of the decisions that are being made by Trump. They'll take that on personally just because they want to support Trump. So on some level, I have to give them credit for the courage of their convictions, I guess.
Right.
That certainly they are resolute about what they believe, and they are tenacious and that they are willing to undergo whatever they need to undergo to get the result that they want. But again, the fact that it's going to cost way more than the 800,000 federal employees who are furloughed, who are not going to be paid. That's going to cost, that's going to run into a cost of a couple of $1 billion within a few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because all the people that are still going to work because they're essential, and they can't take the time off in the, I think it's the Coast Guard and a few other departments, those
Police
people are
officers.
they're gonna have to be back paid.
Correct.
They, they don't just pick up where they left off. They're going to
Exactly.
have to be back paid for all that. So it's
Exactly.
going to I mean, every shutdown is just at a huge cost. So it has to be something that you feel is worthwhile. And again, the saddest part is that we're not dealing with someone who's ideological. We're dealing with someone who basically is using the government as a distraction and a tool. The same way that he used the military as a distraction and a tool during the midterms, he's doing the same thing now, because many would argue that, Rush Limbaugh and Ann Coulter kind of bullied and pressured him into changing his stance
That's
on
exactly what they did.
Yeah, but more importantly than that, while they did do that, I don't think it's about that. I think this has more to do with him knowing the details of what Mueller is going to be coming out with soon, and this keeps his base happy. This keeps his base, as long as he's fighting some type of culture war, this will keep his base distracted from the Mueller probe, and that's going to become deadly serious for him in the next month.
Well, the good thing about a Trump presidency, if that doesn't sound like an oxymoron, but the good thing about a Trump presidency is that the pendulum has swung so far. He's so erratic. He's so petulant. He's so pugnacious. He's so the pendulum has swung so far that in 2020, I have to believe that the pendulum is going to swing back to the other side just as hard, and that we're going to get, the numbers are going to be so overwhelming in 2020, that we'll finally have a group of people in government so that we can get some things accomplished.
Absolutely. We're going to have to leave it there, sir. What an excellent conversation. So we're going to take a quick break. I'm really excited about our next guest, Mr. Michael Harriot. He's one of my favorite writers from the Root, but I'll tell you all about it after the break. We'll be right back on Humanity in the Headlines on IntellectualRadio.com. We are back on Humanity in the Headlines. I've been waiting to do this segment and excited to do this segment, and always excited to have our next guest. He's one of my favorite writers. I say this every time we have him on. I'm really frustrated because Game of Thrones is taking way too long to come back, and I can't wait to see what this brother's going to write this year about the last season of Game of Thrones. If you watch Game of Thrones and you have not read the writings of this guy, you definitely want to go back and find them. His name is Mr. Michael Harriot, contributor to The Root. How are you today, sir?
I'm great. How are you?
Oh man, I'm great. This is Atiba and David with Humanity in the Headlines. And again, I hope you had a wonderful Christmas, and we definitely want to wish you a happy New Year. And thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't get a chance to send you the topic. So we're just going to have a really relaxed, off the cuff conversation. But I promise you, everything that we're going to talk about, I'm sure, is well within your wheelhouse. We're going to talk a little bit about the Me Too movement, the blue wave, Brett Kavanaugh, Black people having police called on them for existing while Black, and child separation at the border. Is that stuff you could probably talk about for a little bit, Mike?
I think I can run with that.
Yep, I figured as much. So we're going to start with the Me Too movement and in 2018, and we're going to talk about some of the folks that kind of got accused, have accusations against them, kind of what happened as a result of those accusations, and where do we go from here. So we just got a couple minutes to go through this. But the first person that stuck out to me was Morgan Freeman. For those that don't know, he's an actor. He voices everything. If the movie has a narration, he's probably doing it. So His accusation was that 8 women came forward with allegations of harassment against Freeman. 2 said he subjected them to unwanted touching. Another woman who worked as a production assistant for the 2015 film Going in Style said he tried to lift up her skirt multiple times, asking her whether she was wearing underwear. The response from Freeman, he said, quote, anyone who knows me or has worked with me knows that I am not someone who would willingly offend or knowingly make anyone feel uneasy, end quote. Freeman said in the statement, quote, I apologize to anyone who felt uncomfortable or disrespected. That was never my intent, end quote. Aftermath, nothing to note as of May 23rd. What did you think when you first heard Morgan Freeman being accused, Mike?
So I think this is the reality with a lot of Black people, right? So I think a lot of Black people believe that women shouldn't be harassed wherever they are, at work, in the workplace, at home, or on the streets. But historically, we have to admit that Black people have been falsely accused by white women of what we call now sexual harassment. I think that's what you would call. That's what we would have termed it with Emmett Till. That's what we would have termed it during, right before Black Wall Street burned, or right before the massacre in Rosewood. So with Morgan Freeman, you have those conflicting views of should we believe these people, or is Morgan Freeman someone who has been quietly slipping under the radar? And so, we haven't seen any of the real evidence of it. So I think that's what we need to do. We need to treat, all of these accusations. There's this phrase "believe women," and I think we should believe everyone when they show the evidence and wait for the evidence. I don't think we should automatically believe anyone, but I don't think we should dismiss women who say they have been sexually harassed.
That's an excellent point of view. I'm going to be honest with you, though. I think he did it. I love Morgan Freeman. He's one of my favorite actors.
Yeah.
He really is. But as I read some of the more salacious details, I was like, yep, I could kind of see that. Now, again, I'm not saying I don't want to ever see him in a movie again. I'm saying a lot of this Me Too movement to me is just cause for a reset. I think men in general have just been accustomed to being, especially rich, successful, powerful men. Let me say that too. Have been accustomed to being able to behave in a certain way without any consequence, obviously for a very long time. And I think this is just a cause for men to kind of reset. I do not think Morgan Freeman would rape anybody or nothing like that. I could see him giving some woman some unwanted attention because he's Morgan Freeman and not realizing that the attention that he's given might make that person uncomfortable. Now,
I agree.
Yeah. So here's another one though. We got to talk about our man Bill Cosby. So Bill Cosby, who is, Bill Cosby, one of the richest men in Hollywood, reported at one time, even looking to buy NBC, he was convicted and sentenced. I'm reading now from a Washington Post article written by Manuel Fresenia. He says, comic legend Bill Cosby, he was describing him when he was getting sentenced. He said a once beloved father figure and moralizing African-American cultural icon was sentenced to 3 to 10 years in state prison Tuesday in a sexual assault case that was capped by the first celebrity trial of the Me Too era. It goes on to say, in his ruling, Judge Stephen O'Neill said that the evidence Cosby planned the drugging and sexual assault of his victims was overwhelming, based on Cosby's own words in a civil disposition. Once the reality of the sentence sank in, the aging comedian began to shed the trappings of his wealth. Out came his wallet, which he handed to an aide. Off came his elegant silk tie. Then he shrugged out of his bespoke dark blue pinstripe suit jacket. He rolled up his sleeves. There was no family member there to comfort him, so he joked and chuckled with his attorneys. I'm going to go to you on this one, Dave. Has it sank in yet that Bill Cosby was tried and convicted of the charges that he had against him?
I'm listening to the conversation so far, and I definitely, when Bill Cosby, what strikes me about Bill Cosby the most, and this is probably the best way I can put it. I can imagine 20 years from now that someone is going to come out and say, Snoop Dogg took advantage of me back in 1991. Yeah, he kept giving me weed. and for the people, and for someone who's born today, 20 years from now, they might hear that story and might be taken aback. They might be, I can't believe that Snoop Dogg would get a woman high to take advantage of her. And but the people who are alive today would be like, hey, if you hanging out with Snoop, that there's going to be some marijuana involved. I'm sympathetic to Bill Cosby as much as a function of Quaaludes were the drug of the day in the 60s and the 70s. That's not as big a drug today. So in his mind, he might be thinking back like, what are you all talking about? That's what we did back then. We would have a glass of wine, pop a Quaalude, and then hang out. And and I have to say, in this whole Me Too movement, that it's not lost on me at all. And Mike, you kind of alluded to this, but it's not lost on. I would have more respect for the Me Too movement if there were a bunch of women talking about men at every echelon of life taking advantage of them. It's not lost on me that all of the men that are targets of the Me Too movement are rich, powerful men. And I do think that while certainly men should not be excused for taking advantage of women or raping women or anything like that, I do think that women have to at least admit that women seek out rich, powerful men, and that there's a fine line between, if you're a rich, powerful man and you get more attention from women than the average male, there's a fine line between taking advantage of your celebrity and taking advantage of women. Where am I going wrong, Mike?
I think you're right. I think we have to realize that all of those things can be true, right? Like men, like Bill Cosby can be someone who took advantage of women, and Bill Cosby can be been the target of women who sought him out for his celebrity or for his money. I think both things can be true. But when we look at the Bill Cosby story, and it goes back to Morgan Freeman, they are old men who grew up in the 30s and the 40s and the
Exactly.
50s. Both are in their 70s, right? So it could be that they abused women, just like, okay, for instance, if a white person, for instance, says, well, back in my days, we wouldn't have let our daughters date a black person, or we wouldn't have let a black person sit at the table with us. We would have said, well, that's a racist. That's back in the day. And that's abusive. And they are a victim of the era that they grew up in, right? So both of those things are true. They are a racist. They're an abuser of people, and they are victims of the time that they grew up in their time. And if you went up to a woman right now and offered her to come to your hotel room and have a glass of wine, she'd look at you like you're crazy. Like, who are you? Because you ain't Bill Cosby, right?
Right.
I think that you're kind of making. I think we're saying the same thing, but I like the way that you're framing it. That, yeah, if you were, what hasn't been factored into the Me Too movement is that there are issues of time and like once upon a time it was okay for the boss to pat his secretary on the butt.
Right.
Once upon a time, it was okay for for a man to whistle at a woman, or there were a lot of things that were accepted practice that over time have become unaccepted, and that's where that's why I haven't really I haven't really staked my flag on one side of the field or the other on the whole Me Too movement, because the Me Too movement does not make the distinction between unwanted flirting, sexual harassment and sexual assault. The Me Too movement has put all of that into one bucket, and you've got a whole group of men who are being cut down, and we're not making distinctions between behavior.
Right, it's all called sexual misconduct now. There is no difference between what Bill Cosby did, no distinction between what Bill Cosby did and what Morgan Freeman did. We're literally sitting here having the same conversation about Morgan Freeman making unwanted comments in the same conversation as what would be called now rape, serial rape, right?
Right. Exactly.
We're having the same conversation, putting it under conduct or the Me Too movement.
And that's kind of why I kind of said when this is Atiba again, when I said I could see Morgan Freeman doing that, because I could identify with that kind of behavior being in the workplace myself. Because I'm like, man, right. I could be Me Too'd if somebody really wanted to get technical about it. So again, that's really where I was going.
But you just made my earlier point for me. You might have done Atiba Buchanan might have done the exact same thing that Morgan Freeman did, but because they can't sue you civilly for it and win $1 million, nobody's going to say anything to you. And that's the ultimate hypocrisy of the Me Too movement, is that the Me Too movement, in addition to lumping all types of behavior together, the only men who are actually targeted are men who have something to lose. So women are not just going out and saying, hey, we abhor this behavior unilaterally. They only abhor the information, or they only abhor the behavior if there's a payday at the end of it.
Well, I'm gonna push back on that and say, like, those are the ones we hear about, and those are the ones we talk about. My ultimate point is that in every situation, it's a lot more nuanced than what people discuss in a 140 character Twitter post, right?
Great point.
So
it's 280 now, bro.
And we reduced it into these large, broad things when we need to have a more nuanced discussion, but. Yeah, I wouldn't reduce it to the only people being accused. The only people we're talking about are the more famous ones.
Sure. And I see that point. And the last thing I'll say about it is, even our laws make distinctions and have gradate. We have in the law, you have involuntary, first and second degree involuntary manslaughter, first and second degree voluntary manslaughter, second degree murder, third degree murder, first degree murder. So even though our law makes the distinction that you can have an act that has a certain outcome, but we kind of divide it up and we make distinctions, and then we dole out punishment based on those categories within, even though the end result of the act is the same. And so again, I think it's incumbent on us, and I think it's incumbent on us as men to make that point within the Me Too movement, to say that we can support women who are being marginalized and who are being taken advantage of, while at the same time not allowing women to, or at least us not participating and not making those distinctions.
All right, so we're going to keep it moving, Mike. Again, we thank you so much for being with us. Only because we have time going against us. That was a great conversation, but we have so much more to cover. I definitely want to talk about the midterm elections and the big blue wave that we witnessed. As a matter of fact, I'm going to quote Harry Enton from a piece from CNN. He said, latest House results confirm 2018 wasn't a blue wave, it was a blue tsunami. Now, this was written in December 6th, and he says, and just a couple things I want to talk about here, but he said the final votes are being counted from the 2018 election. They confirmed that the Democrats crushed Republicans. Let's start with the seat count. Republican Rep. David Valadao of California's 21st District conceded on Thursday to Democrat TJ Cox. Cox's victory, combined with other election results, means that Democrats have picked up a net gain of 40 seats. So we're talking about a 40-seat gain in the House, a huge swing. We're looking at a potential Speaker Pelosi, and we're looking at some serious oversight now for this president. Mike, my question to you, do you think it was a blue wave? And if so, what would you attribute it to?
Yeah, I think it was a blue wave, and I just want to add that imagine what that wave would have looked like if they would have counted all of Black people's votes.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Florida and Georgia in
yeah, it was
particular, right?
right. So it was a blue wave, and the reason for it is simple. Like we know that first of all, when Black people vote, we are the difference. Even though most white people are Republicans, there aren't enough to tilt the political scales to the Republican side without the Black vote. In other words, we can make up for and exceed for the number of white people who vote Republican. And so, even if 65% of white people vote Republican, and if enough Black people and people of color vote the other way, we can discount those votes. And so there was a blue wave simply because we've seen that people were fed up with. Really, what Trump has done is laid Republican politics bare. He exposed it to, they would always talk about fiscal conservatism or law and order or all of the other buzzwords, but he exposed that, it was really all about race all the time, which is what we've been saying all along.
Right.
And so Trump exposed that he wasn't able to dog whistle, so he had to yell. Everybody grew up with one person who never learned how to whistle, so they would just kind of make a high-pitched squeal and pretend that they were whistling, and that's what Trump was doing. And I think that's the reason for the blue wave.
So you think it was really an admonishment of Trump and a repudiation of his policies more than it was just general Republican apathy?
No, I don't know if it was simply Trump's politics. Trump's actions, political actions, exposed the conservative movement's politics. Like they really never cared about small government. They really never cared about conservatism, fiscal conservatism. They never really cared about balancing the budget. They never cared about any of these things because they're not doing it now. They're not balancing the budget. They're not making government smaller. They're not going with fiscal conservatism. They're not concerned about God and family, they've always claimed, or the religious right has always claimed. It's all about power and money. And now we see it, and so many people see it that they voted the other way. And so it's not simply about Trump. It's about what Trump has shown his life on.
And that's a great point because Atiba and I have had that conversation scores of times on this show. And the biggest hypocrisy that I have a problem with, and it's frustrating when I have conversations with conservatives. But if your answer to everything is the same, if the economy is doing well, cut taxes. If the economy is doing poorly, cut taxes. Yeah, the economy's kind of in the middle. Why don't we just go ahead and cut taxes? If your answer to everything is cut taxes, if your answer to everything is deregulate, if your answer to everything is small government, unless we're talking about abortion, then we want to monitor, we want to put a GPS on every uterus in the country to make sure that we can, so again, to your larger point, the Republican Party has been so they've been so hypocritical. It's not that, they've kind of flip-flopped. They have literally, and we've been able to see it in this new age of media from Bush, from Clinton to Bush to Obama to Trump, that the Republican ideology does a 180 depending upon who is at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
And you needn't look any further than talking about the debt and deficit to see that in action, because I feel like the entire 8 years Obama was president, all I heard about was rising debt and deficits. And then the deficits get cut under Obama and nobody talks about it. They rise again tremendously under Trump, and I haven't heard a Republican say anything about that. Had you, Mike? When was the last time you heard a Republican say anything about debt or deficit?
Never.
Under Trump.
We don't have a government right now because they want to spend $5 billion. These deficit hawks want to spend $5 million building the Lego wall for immigration that has been going steadily declining and is negative immigration. We've had net negative immigration for 10 years. And they're talking about building a wall and using $5 billion. These are the people who talk about the deficit. These are the people who they doubled the size of ICE agents, but they talk about the deficit. They increased the size of government. The biggest deficit increases are during Republican administrations. We know this. It's an indisputable fact. And these are the people who, when they're not in power, they only talk about it when they're not in power. You never hear it when they're in power. It's only when they're not in power, because every single political tactic that they use, every part of their platform, is just an attempt to appeal to people so they can have power.
Exactly, because I mean, even if you just look at the last 2 years of Trump, you take his $1.5 trillion tax cut, you take the $700 billion being spent on the military over 2 years, you talk about those increases in ICE and the things that you just referred to. Just that alone, you're talking about 2.5, upwards of $3 trillion.
Did you talk about the tariffs?
Right, and again, the tariffs. Would someone please explain to this dude? Would someone please tell Donald J. Trump that tariffs are not, that money doesn't come into the treasury? Like, he does not get that deficits between countries is a function of the amount of private industry that is traded between those two. Like, he's acting like if he passes these tariffs that it's going to be money going into the United States bank account, not realizing that that's money that we, the American citizens, spend when we go to the store and buy things.
You know what it's like? It's like if you had $10 in your bank account and your wife went out and said and bought a pair of shoes for $50, and you said, "Well, that was our last little bit of money." She said, "But they were actually on sale. They were really $100. So honestly, I saved us $50."
Right.
So you should really be thanking me. Really, his logic on tariffs, we're saving money.
Mike, here's something I want to throw out to you, and I'm glad we're having this conversation. But here's something I want to throw out to you, and I would love to hear your opinion on this. The biggest cost that Donald Trump is costing America is not the tariffs, it's not the ballooning debt, it's not it's not any of the things that he's doing. The biggest cost that Donald Trump is actually the biggest cost to America right now is the intangible cost of the association between Trump and who he is with American products. My example of that is the iPhone. This is the first year that the iPhone, like the Apple stock has gone down 33%. They're cutting their orders of raw materials because no one is buying the iPhone. All three American car companies are cutting production on sedans and cars because they are not selling enough of them internationally. I would submit that there is an association between who Trump is and the things he has done as president and the brand of America. Trump is damaging the brand of America, and that is going to be the biggest cost that we are going to suffer as a country over the next few years.
Right. I think I really like the way you phrase that, because that's what it is, right? The brand of America is being demolished under Trump. We don't have we don't have any credibility right now.
Yeah, that's a key word
on the geopolitical world stage, right? Or in the international trade community, or in any of the geopolitical or the economic international categories. He basically set everything on fire, and it's not right. It's that, like, for instance, he's a great example, right? So with the international trade agreement, the climate agreement, or with the agreement between Canada, U.S., and Mexico, none of that will ever matter again, because he has made it so that even the things that we have signed won't matter because we'll always be a country who they doubt will keep their word. So every agreement from here on out, even if he didn't make it, countries will wonder, well, that president can always break that agreement if he wants to, which is damaging the brain. He's not just damaged the country because of what he's done, but forever and ever and ever, the people will doubt the word of the United States and will doubt the quality of our and will politics and our economics because they know, like, at their very whim, an idiot sitting in the White House could change their mind.
Yeah, and to both of your points, as I hear you say that, the first thing I think about is the Iran deal that he tore up for no good reason. How can that's why North Korea hasn't denuclearized to this day, because all they have to do is look at the Iran deal and say, why should we cooperate with you when we know you're not going to hold your word? You've demonstrated that because Iran did everything they were supposed to do, and it didn't matter when Trump got into the office and he went ahead and just dismantled that deal. So before we get out of time, because we're pushing up on the hour, I do want to get one thing, because I want to talk about Brett Kavanaugh, but we really don't have time. I do want to talk about this for 2018, because this is something that I hope 2019 and going forward is severely diminished. Mike, what's up with black folk having police called on them for existing while black? I mean, was 2018 a rough year for that or what?
Yeah, I think it was a rough year because there were so many stories about it. I don't know if it increased or we just talked about it more. Like, this is a thing that white people have always done, right? And we just never talked about. And this, an example of that is there's a story in headlines today, or this about a guy who was sitting in a hotel who they had to see to prove that he was stationed there because he was sitting in line. Well, I wrote a story about that happening to me a year ago, wondering, like, is this something that happens to white people? Like, I was sitting in a hotel in New York and the same thing happened to me. So there are a lot of people, black men everywhere, who can relate to your story about somebody calling the police on them, just having to prove they belonged where they belong. And so I don't know if it's a new thing or that we just talked about it. It's like, there are a bunch of things that black people have been through or black people have done for years, and then white people find out about it, and then they say, wow, I can't believe that what's happening to you. This is going on. Like, white people think police brutality just started like in 2015 with Trayvon, right? So it's been happening for years, but I'm glad we're talking about it now.
I would definitely agree with you that the proliferation of smartphones, has certainly, has shown it more, and it almost has, you would be confused to think, oh, it's happening more. To your point, is it happening more? Is it just, every time you go on Facebook or social media or YouTube, you see a new video of something, someone documenting this happening? I wonder. The thing that bothers me though is that as a community, we seem so apathetic when these things happen. We get mad for a couple of weeks and then we move on, and then it happens again and we get mad again, but we don't get as mad as we were the first time. And just over time, when you have the cumulative effect of having to suffer these indignities over and over and over again, I just wonder when we are going to get together as a group of African Americans and really come up with a concrete way to change, to get some change so that these things stop happening.
Right. I think that's a good point. I think we have this implied acceptance that this is white people's space, and sometimes even if it's not for a good cause, they're going to call the police or make the claim for their space, right? And so I think that there has to be some kind of consequence. Without the consequence, it'll keep happening. And I think there should be some kind of civil fine for you calling the police and the police coming out, not just for wasting their time, but when the police come out and find out that you made a claim that has no legal basis. In other words, if you said something, that I did something, and the police come out and there is no crime associated with it, then I think you should have to pay a fine because it costs ultimately the taxpayers and the police department's money, and that's how people get killed.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, essentially, Trayvon was somebody who was just walking down the street with a bag of Skittles. Eric Garner, somebody called the police about some cigarettes. We can't forget the people, like we talk about the Starbucks thing and all that, but we can't forget the people who died. The guy, John Crawford in Ohio, was buying a BB gun in Walmart, right? Tamir Rice was in the park playing with his son, right? None of these people were threatening anyone, and they're dead because a white person called the police.
Because a white person got uncomfortable.
That's the important part to remember.
Right.
And that's what I'm saying is that I really think that African Americans, we need to give up on the whole marching and protesting and all that. Like that time has passed. We've been marching and protesting and doing sit-ins and die-ins and doing things like that going back 50, 60, 70 years. I really think we need to figure out what's the next step in the evolution of our protest against our mistreatment by the majority. Because at the end of the day, police officers and the majority have figured out, something happens, we're angry for a couple of weeks, we make a bunch of noise, and then the media moves on and it fades into the background until it happens again. So we've got to figure out something, a more tangible, productive, I dare say revolutionary way to affect the change that we want to see in our society.
Mike, we're going to give you the last word. We're going to give you the last word, Mike. Going into 2019, my friend, what advice do you have for America as a whole and Black people specifically going into 2019? What do we need to do to get better?
Okay, I think America as a whole, I would advise them that America has never gone wrong when they listen to Black people. And for Black people as a whole, I will remind them that to keep being Black, because even if they denigrate it today, they're going to love it tomorrow as soon as they find out a way to steal and sell it.
We're going to have to leave it there. We want to thank Mr. Michael Harriot from The Root for being on today. Mike, have you authored any books, anything you want to let our listeners know about?
No, you can find me on The Root, everyday writing, and that's it, I guess.
Okay, excellent.
That's good enough.
That's good enough. Yeah,
we appreciate your contribution to the Black intelligentsia and giving us something to think about. To another perspective to think about the things that we see every day in our community. We thank you for that.
Yeah, you guys, if you're not familiar with his writings, please get familiar with it. This guy's unapologetically Black. He is intelligent. He's sharp, and on top of all that, he's funny. So if you want to see, get some good reading in that again will lift your spirits, but also inform you as well, then again, get used to his writing. I read him all the time, never regret it. So again, we thank you, sir, for being on with us today, and we definitely want to wish you a happy new year going into 2019.
Same to you guys.
Thank you. Michael Harriot, everybody, from The Root.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey, we're that's it. That's all we got today. That's all we got this year. So we are sorry that we didn't have time to give all the information we wanted, but man, what we did give, I thought was really, really helpful. Everyone that listened today, stay warm, share the show on Facebook, and just be blessed. Thanks for listening to Humanity and the Headlines, and we will see you in 2019. Take care.